Och välkomna allihopa. Eddie Muka heter jag och jobbar som curator på Statens konstråd. Och från nu I switch to English. Sorry. It's not only to honor the guests that we have tonight, but also because my Swedish is not there yet. I'll just say a few words about this project and we'll explain a little bit the plan for tonight. Because as you know, the program is slightly long, but we will get to hear a panel discussion and then we will watch the work of Andjeas Ejiksson. So I just want to say that it was 3 years ago that Statens konstråd decided to try a new working method, namely an open call that was addressed to all Sweden-based artists to come with an idea for an artwork in public space. At the core of the invitation, or this open call, was an attempt to test new boundaries, to, in close dialogical processes with the artists, give them the possibility to explore and experiment, and also to work with topical issues of our times today. We received more than 200 applications, and then an invited jury in a two-step process selected the winning project, which was Television Without Frontiers by Andjeas Ejiksson. From that moment, and 3 years on, we embarked together with Andjeas on a crazy journey, I can say, that had a lot of unknowns and unexpected turns for both of us as an institution, I mean, and Andjeas as an artist. But it was also super exciting and an incredibly learning process for both of us. This process peaked during some days in November last year when we entered a highly exhilarating collective experience in the studios of SVT here in Göteborg when we recorded the film that you'll see tonight. And it was an experience for everybody involved, I can promise you that. It was for the artists and the institutions involved. It was for production teams from both Statens konstråd and SVT. It was for all the participants in that production, and one of them is here with us tonight, and you'll get to meet her and hear from her. But it was also for the audience that participated there. So now, tonight, I'm very happy that we are at the beginning of the second part of that journey, when we bring the work that Andjeas has created, start bringing it to the public. Before giving the floor to Katerina that will introduce the panel, I just want to tell some practical things about the evening. So we will start with the panel discussion, and then at 6:30 there will be a break with snacks and refreshments, so we keep the sugar levels from screaming. Then outside, I believe you all saw the flying turtle that is one of the main characters in the film. So there is a surprise that awaits everybody after the screening. The screening is finishing at 8:15, and from 8:30 you are all very welcome to the bar of Hagabion. There will be another element from the film that will be, I can just say, served to the ones that come in. It's very important that you save these tickets. Not only because they have an image of the work, but you see that there is a place with a line there. With these tickets, you can get a free drink at the bar and join us in celebrating with Andjeas. But you have to write your name on that line. I hope you will enjoy tonight and look forward to starting this evening. Thank you for coming. Katerina?
Okay, hello. My name is Katerina Sullivan, and I work as a TV producer, and I'm a journalist. And I was in SVT in the building when this project, when these days when they filmed the project went on, and it was very interesting to hear people talking, going in between doing news and then doing this art project. And so it's great to see you, Andjeas Ejiksson, sorry. You are the main character of this evening. I'm going to introduce the panel to you now. This is Andjeas, the artist. You must have a microphone.
Shall I say something?
Yes, I want you to say, just
so I
some.
should sit here and talk all by myself.
No, I can't. We do it like this.
Okay.
I think Andjeas is a bit nervous, which is give him a warm applause. Yeah, great. Then we take up the rest of the panel, and then we'll start. So Ash, I think you are the next one, coming from the editor of Novare Media in London. Also participating in the film that you're going to see, Television Without Frontiers, because tonight, I should say before I introduce the rest of the panel, we are going to devote this hour to television without frontiers. Is it possible? Is it desirable? We are going to discuss Eurikon, very interesting project that was launched in the early 1980s. And we also have then, I'm going to shake you up, Yannick Kirk Sørensen, the associate professor in communication and media from Denmark, Aalborg. And at last, not the least, Ioana Avadani from Romania. Welcome. And you are, and now I have left my order here, so I'm sorry. I have to say, you are the chairman of Independent Journalism Center in Bucharest, Romania. So you are all very welcome. I just want you to say a few words about yourselves before we start off this discussion. What is your specialty for the evening?
Oh, I think that would be ask very strange questions.
That we should ask you. I thought you would say the viewer. Your specialty is the viewer, I thought.
I'm a researcher, associate professor, and been since last 10 years been looking how broadcast transforms to online.
Yeah.
And before that, I worked actually at Danish Broadcasting Corporation doing sound art for the radio.
Yes. And then the artist, Andjeas. A few words.
Shall I say something?
Yes.
Okay, I'm the artist. I made this film together with lots of other people. I mean, that's what you learn. I've never made a film production before. And one thing that I learned is that you don't really do it yourself. It's you have an idea and then people work with you and something comes out of the process.
It's a big
So
teamwork.
that's what I do.
Yes. And Ash, your work with Novare Media, what is that?
So I work with a political media outlet in London. We started out in 2010. It was a podcast run by two guys who were so broke that podcast recordings would get interrupted by bailiffs like every other week. And then somehow we've managed to grow our core team to 12 people. We do video, articles, radio, and we consider ourselves a coffee shop for the left in Britain to have conversations about where it's come from, where it is, and where it wants to go.
And Ioana Avadani, your role here tonight, what you say is...
Well, I bring my experience as the Schrödinger's cat, being and not being a European in the same time, having and not having a public television at the same time, and having also the privilege of assisting the accession of my country to Europe, participating in the process and contributing to it.
Mm. And to just give some headlines for how the discussion will go on here, we have 1 hour and we've already done 10 minutes almost, so wow, time's flying. We're going to start with a discussion about Eurikon, this project that is that I find very intriguing, and then I think we're going to go over to discussing television beyond national borders. Is it possible? What do we want with that? Is it possible today? And the viewer, is there viewer, is there a European viewer, or is the viewer in their own bubble only? Is mass communication still possible the way we are used to? Big questions. And public service, where is public service in this media content of today? And I think when we come to that question, I think we have to start with, what do we mean by public service? Because I think it's very different being in the UK or in Romania or in Sweden. But first, maybe should I say some words about Eurikon, and then you can fill in what was it that interested you with this?
Sure.
Seems like it's going to be my show, not yours. This is not good.
Oh, should I have said no? I want to tell people about it. Shall I?
If you want to.
Okay. So in the beginning of the 1980s, many things were going on in Europe. There was a sort of a struggle for constructing a European community or identity. The satellite broadcasting was introduced, so suddenly there was an opportunity to reach a completely new TV audience, which is in a much broader landscape, and commercial commercial networks were sort of attempting to establish different kinds of let's say more or less pan-European approaches, and there was there was also this sort of as I understand it, network of people who had the vision or fantasy of sharing content across the European continent. So there was a sort of a number of projects, and of them, I think Eurikon is the most interesting. And it was not an actual public broadcast. It was an experiment. So 15 public service networks in Europe, and actually North Africa as well, which is also important or interesting, came together to produce 5 weeks of experimental broadcast. And they were sort of experimenting with different forms of translation, different forms of programming, different forms of content, in order to sort of find a way or a format to address a European audience. They wanted to address the viewer not as sort of Swedes or Germans or Algerians, but as Europeans. So this is basically the background of the Eurikon project.
Yeah, and what was it that intrigued you? Because it must have been the ground for your making this film later on.
I mean, initially I was mainly interested in it as a sort of in the European perspective, or I was using it as basically an allegory for the European situation, and I wanted to use this project as a framework to ask sort of questions about where we are in Europe today. Would this sort of would this vision be possible or even relevant in a contemporary situation?
And when I talked to you, Joanna, earlier last week, you said something about who was the people behind this idea. Who were they, do you think? In 1982, 15 companies come together. We're going to make television for a European audience.
Well, if you take a look at what the people wanted, I think that the main idea was coming from the European institutions, to say the European Commission and the European Parliament. At that time, there was this desire to promote a European personality and European identity. Well, it didn't sound too great with the people in Europe, because it sounded a little bit nationalistic. It rubbed the wrong way, the nationalistic governments. So they somehow try to promote this cultural identity of Europe. And television looked like a very good vehicle for this. Just to be very frank, I don't think that the European institutions are past this this thinking. Even now, they consider that television is a very good modulator for the European identity. They should look around, I think.
Did you say also, Andjeas, that when they sent these for these 5 weeks, they sent in their own languages, but it was interpreted simultaneously, like in the UN or in the Parliament, in European Parliament?
Yeah, it was simultaneously interpreted in 6. It differs in different broadcasts. Somewhere they say 6, and some places they say 7. So 6 or 7 different languages, and the sort of the TV signal was broadcasted with different sound channels depending on where in Europe it was directed. So
sounds very complicated.
Yes.
And I think you have 20 seconds grasping the viewer. Were they successful?
I mean, it isn't too bad, actually. I mean, it's fun to watch, but maybe, I mean, it's also, I mean, of course, this is also, I mean, it's also a technical matter, because in Southern Europe, people are more used to voiceover, or what do you call it? Dubbing, yes.
Dubbing, yeah.
And in Northern Europe, we are more used to teletext or subtitling. So I think like the reception of this model was more successful in the South and less successful in North.
Okay.
I would say.
What do you think, Ash, about this Eurikon?
I mean, listening to this discussion, I can't help but wonder if what we're talking about isn't the question of, is broadcasting across frontiers possible? Because the internet has proved very much that it is. It's, do institutions who were born during the age of radio and television have a role in broadcasting across borders? And for me, that's the live question here. Because if you look at the 5 biggest companies in the world, most of them are communications platforms. You've got Facebook, you've got Alphabet, which is the company which owns Google. You've got Apple, which, of course, hello. You've got Amazon, and you've got something else which escapes my brain just for now. And if you take the example of Apple, for instance, it controls more wealth than the entirety of the Netherlands, I think. So we already have these communications platforms which have eroded national borders and sovereignty as we know it.
Exactly.
You know, you think about the way in which YouTube and Google in particular are trying to pioneer the use of artificial intelligence to have instant speech-to-text translation and dictation. So Google recently brought up an app called Trint, which is a form of dictation software. So television is in this space where, you know, producers and artists and directors have to make a decision, which is, do you try and catch up with the internet, do what it does but somehow better with a tiny fraction of the resources, or do you look elsewhere for inspiration and you say, okay, well, broadcasting across borders is possible, but when television does it, when it starts from a very powerful sense of place, it can achieve something different.
Yeah. Andjeas?
Should I say something like that?
Yeah,
sure.
you can respond to this. Yeah, sure. But what do you say, Yannick? Your specialty is... sorry.
But I would just... I mean, this project is a bit anachronistic. I mean, it's also... I mean, it was produced in a time when, as I said in the beginning, sort of broadcasting was extremely limited to national or even more regional areas. So and I think that's what's interesting with it also, because it makes us sort of see ourselves in a way, or their vision of the future is very sort of it doesn't really fit with where we are now.
No.
I mean, that was the really fantastic thing about this project, was for me stepping into it as someone who does most of their stuff online, to step into a studio, and it felt very television, and it was doing the things that only television can do and the internet can't do, which is bring in fiction in order to tell a deeper truth than just a dude with a GoPro can.
Thanks.
But if we go to you, Yannick, your specialty is it's the viewer, right? Where is the viewer? Who is the viewer? Where are we today? Who, you know, you talked a bit to me about tango. If you have an interest in tango, you have like, you know, you go.
I will start to say something very provoking. Public service broadcasting that was created in the 1920s, 1930s as national filter bubbles. And that was instrumental to create a national identity, and that is still the role, because still the funding, like also the Art Council, and you see that there's always this question, how much should we fund something that is not really entirely Danish or whatever. So you see in this all this public service media contracts that it says it should be at least this amount of Danish music on air. So basically where the money comes from inhibits somehow the overall European idea. That is the one thing I would say. The other thing is that we have communication technologies and we have communication, and I think we see many cases that the technologies, they are capable of much more than we are on a communication level. So what happens is that the smartest idea, it captures the market, and that's what we have with social media, because it's a smart idea and you can earn money from it. And then of course the media that was once powerful are feeling the competition, private TV as well as public service media TV. So I think also we should take a very clear distinction between the communication channels and the content created, because we always mix that together when we talk about
communicating,
TV.
you mean like Facebook and Instagram and...
Yeah, we talk about TV, for instance. Are we then talking about the experience of the Flow TV in front of the screen, or we are talking about the... I was actually lucky to see a preview of your show, and that was on Vimeo just a moment ago. So that was not on TV, but I saw a TV on my phone, but still it's TV. So there is something about the identity that the public service media organization, that's my area of research, they have to find out where do they want to be on the TV screen or in the internet.
Yeah.
But if it's not on a TV screen, it's TV or it's just movie or is moving images, to use the European language.
No. But is there a problem about this? You know,
But nowadays they talk about public service media
yeah.
and not broadcasting. And then to try and sort of address something more sort of a broader understanding of what, right? Or you're the researcher.
But I would say that I would say a little bit now again a little bit provoking, but I think national politicians' feeling of having somehow the control of a media outlet, at least they can say what they should do, is still a very strong idea. And also it is very important for this creating of a national identity. But still we have a lot of other identities that are, YouTube knows it better because it knows that I like Argentine tango, for instance.
I would have liked to answer to Ash's point,
Yes.
that we have now television without frontier, with podcast and everything else. The difference is that we choose to watch those. It's not that we sit in front of a TV and somebody decides for us what is good to watch.
I disagree. This is where I disagree completely, because if you look at the use of algorithms, particularly on YouTube, so
Okay, I stand correct.
No, you're just
Yeah, we have the illusion that we can choose.
And the thing that and this is sort of a response to your point, is that as the algorithms, particularly on Facebook, has changed, so has our consumption of media. So a few years ago, Facebook famously did pivot to video. So the algorithm pushed up short bits of video in our timelines. And that had a knock-on effect for broadcasters and journalists in particular. So in newsrooms, suddenly your investigations capacity, your regional reporting got gutted, and money was pumped into video, right? Put video out, make it go viral, make sure it's under 2 minutes, 20 seconds, subtitle it, bish, bash, bosh, done. And then various things happened, and Facebook decided to change its algorithm again. And suddenly all those video teams get gutted again. So that's one of the things that's happened at BuzzFeed, one of the things that's happened at Huffington Post or at Vice. And now the algorithm has changed to prioritize a certain kind of video, which ironically mimics the experience of viewing television. So what people like and what the algorithm encourages on YouTube and on Facebook, it will be put up higher in the timelines, you can pay for it to go further, is at 8 o'clock, there's going to be a live stream of me and my 2 mates talking about whatever. And people will tweet saying, yeah, I'm tuning in, or I've got this on while I'm, cooking my dinner. So it's mimicking the form of television and that sense of community shaping that television is so good for, except revenue's not going towards television.
So I think
I could say the algorithm is the new editor. The difference is that the data curators that sitting at Facebook or YouTube tuning the algorithms, they are not under editorial overview from Europe or from any national country, so they are just doing what turns out to produce most revenue. Now, one of my research topics is to see how public service media, they are right now around in Europe introducing algorithmic recommendation of their content. So the question is now, how will they then design this algorithm to act as an editor? Should it promote content that is not really loved by the viewers, or should it promote the most loved contents? And I tell you, they are in a real dilemma, because until now it was just a matter of a human editor.
But this sounds like a sort of like a judgment day discussion. Is there something we should fear? What do you say, Ash?
It depends what your view of technology is, and I tend to be an optimist. So there's one view which says with every technological advance you invent a new kind of disaster. Which, Paul Virilio says with the invention of the ship you suddenly get the shipwreck. So his theory of the internet is that it creates the potential for what he calls the information bomb. So what happens when all this communications capacity, all this memory capacity goes away? So he imagines it as a disaster. There's the slower form of disaster, which is the slow erosion of our agency as viewers. It takes away the role of editors, things. There's not as much room for slow thinking, the slow development of a story. That's the sort of catastrophizing view. But you could have taken that view with the invention of the printing press. That would have meant the replication of already existing power dynamics in medieval Europe. That is, spoiler alert in case you didn't watch the earlier seasons of Europe, that's not what happened. And so I'm inclined to think that the social and political effects of this kind of technology are not going to be easily managed by the very people that invented them.
No.
And that's a good thing.
And but no, what do you mean though? Because when you say, when you talk about the way things have changed and the way content has changed, it sounds like you're critical to that type of content, or the communities created, when people just sit and talk about nothing online and people are watching it and tweeting and getting into.
Don't get me wrong, I've made my whole career talking about nothing online.
So
I couldn't pay my
rent
without
you're a
talking
part
about
of
nothing
this.
online. I am so 100% complicit. But it's also a fantastic organizational tool. I've seen political organizers who do stuff around climate change, for instance, utilizing broadcast and live streams in order to build up, radical social movements. I've also seen the far right use that kind of technology in order to further a politic which I find disgusting. For me, the cat's out of the bag. You can't put it back in. All you can do is try and stick a collar on it and get on top of it and let it take
ride it. Ride the cat.
Yeah, ride the cat.
Okay, Jan, yeah. Andjeas, you want to say?
No, I don't want to say something at this moment. No.
Okay, not at this moment. The artist waits.
I'm listening. I'm doing research.
Yes, good. Yannick, you wanted to say?
I just remember now we are bashing the Facebook and YouTube. I remember that was when I was younger. We liked to bash TV because it pacified people, and then the World Wide Web came, and there's a new person here, the user, and she is in charge of exactly what she wants to. I mean, that was how you talked about the internet the first 5-10 years or something like that. Now we know there's an algorithm and that somebody wants to earn money on you. So maybe it's now we are lost our virginity somehow.
But the thing is, I find interesting now is now SVT, the Swedish television public service, launched slow TV with the elks walking in the woods. Has anyone seen it? Yeah. This is so interesting. But this, you just watch the elks, the moose walking around, and this is what is this? I just don't. I can't grasp it. It's like. When I was 20 years ago, it was like Big Brother and people having sex, and now people are sitting watching an elk. What is this?
I just remember this, the German show, the schönste Eisenbahnstrecken der Welt, that was showed every night. That was one of the most popular shows, and it ran 10 years, and what you just saw out of the train window, the landscape.
So this big community thing we're working on, getting people over borders, connecting with people. Maybe this is connecting. Silence.
No, but I think also, when I hear this discussion, this is also one of the reasons for the Eurikon project, because what was introduced, as I said in the beginning, what was introduced in the beginning of the 1980s was commercial TV in a sort of pan-European scale, and which sort of changed the landscape that the public service broadcasters were operating in. So the sort of if public service broadcasting in the beginning was a sort of top-down concept, we decide what is good for the people, and we broadcast it to them. In the 1980s, it's sort of, I'm not a media historian, so you might change me, but sort of what I understand happened sort of in the late 70s, 80s was that the viewer became a consumer, and the sort of broadcasting got a different perspective, where we were trying to sort of rather target viewer groups and rather sort of address them as consumers and as trying to find their interests.
What do you mean that today that's the way we look
That's
at them?
what happened during the period when Eurikon was made.
Oh, okay.
During
the 1980s?
That's what happened in the 1980s when commercial TV became an actor on the scene.
And Sweden was far, this happened here in the 90s, so we're a bit behind. But
I remember I did a lot of research, reading sort of I read all articles on which with the word public service in it from the late 70s to the beginning of the 90s in the Swedish sort of newspapers. And there was, during the whole 1980s, there was this discussion about the third channel. Shall we introduce a third channel, and who shall own it? Should it be a commercial television channel? Should it be a pay-per-view television channel? Or should it be like a third channel governed by the public service and so on? So there was this constant debate, and then, like in the beginning of the 1990s, someone started broadcasting TV for Sweden, TV3 from the UK. So the market they beat the public service.
Yeah, the market took over.
Yes.
Yeah. You want to say, Yannick, something?
I mean, it's basically when the market was deregulated, or public service was deregulated, you suddenly saw that they have to position themselves, and if they don't try to have something that is attracting viewers, then everybody's getting annoyed. But I think speaking about the European project, now we are sitting on a stage, and that's because we are here invited because we have something to say, we have an opinion. And you can say the Eurikon was also an attempt to create a stage, but that assumes that there's a clear idea of what you want to say. And the more conceptual you go, the more difficult it is to get an agreement on what you want to say. If we have Eurovision, it's a very popular concept because it's very clear in what it wants to say. Now, if you want to say something more on how to create political cohesion or solve environmental problems, we are all getting a little bit out of words, and then we don't really want to go on the stage.
It sounds like you think that public service is a good thing. It's important that we have public service. Do I read you? Are you? No.
That depends on what you mean by public service.
Exactly.
Because I'm coming from a country that abused the idea of public service to the last consequences. For us, public service during the communist time, it was the only service we got actually, was propaganda 2 hours per day. You can imagine what you can get within 2 hours per day. And after the fall of the communism, we tried to reform the public service.
And how did it go?
We are still trying to reform the public service. There's no solution to this.
So what is public service in Romania today?
Under 2% audience rates in television, on a market clearly dominated by commercial, and not only in terms of advertising, but also in terms of quality and the interest of the materials. Even the journalists working for the public television admitted that they are irrelevant. And I think that this is the death of a public service, the moment you become irrelevant for the public. 2% is nothing.
No.
If people do not watch you or do not follow you.
But if people don't trust, because I think this is, isn't this, it was political, it was from top down.
It's clearly political because we had something like a window of opportunity with a less politically controlled PDG. We have the French model with president and general manager embodied by the same person. And he was a film director. And he came with all this artist freedom in mind. He brought the public television from 2% to 16% market share. When he was dismissed, the television came and was replaced by a party person. Within 3 months, from June to September, the public television was back to 2%.
People don't trust the message.
People don't trust the message, and they don't trust the institution, which probably allows us to make the distinction between the public institution and the public content, because we need public content.
And that's the thing, is that in the UK, which doesn't have that same history of authoritarianism, trust in public service broadcasting is very, very low, some of the lowest in Europe. One of the reasons for that, I think, is that particularly between the BBC and the ruling party, and that has been when the ruling party used to be Labour and now with the Conservatives, you have a revolving door. So you've got people that work for the ruling party at the BBC, people from the BBC working for the ruling party, and it's, you know, you can see the collusion of interests in your daily current affairs programming. What's more, often that programming is not reflecting the social and economic reality of people living in the country, particularly after the financial crisis. What is the point of showing statistics that say, look, GDP, that's going up, when people's pay packets aren't going up? What's the point in saying, look, unemployment, that's at a record low, when people who are employed can't afford to feed themselves. So trust is very, very low. And
So
then
what's your solution to that then?
my solution to that is to, one, diversify the hell out of newsrooms. So if you look at the number of people who come from private schools that you have to pay for, it is so many times more than the percentage that's found across society. It is majority male, it is 91% white, and until you diversify those newsrooms, you're not going to get different kinds of stories.
But it looks like that only in public service or all over the media?
That's across the board.
Yeah.
The second thing would be having a tax on tech giants. So that's your Facebook, your Amazon, your Google, tax on UK profits in order to then fund the development of more regional journalism and investigative journalism. And then the third thing is have a law saying that if you have worked in government, you have to wait 5 years before you can work for a public service broadcaster. And if you've worked for a public service broadcaster, you have to wait 5 years before you can work for the government.
You want that rule?
Yeah, I want that
know.
rule.
That's a good one.
You remember the
very not very
invitation I
popular.
made to you to come to Romania?
Yeah.
I withdraw.
Magical things happen. Yes, Yannick, you want to do?
I think the big exercise for public service media is the same as for governments. That's the legitimacy, democratic legitimacy. So you can say, in a way, they are mirroring the problem that we are. But I cannot really think of any other organizations that could take over this legitimacy, because all other media brands, including Facebook and Google, we know that they have other intentions. But the problem is, of course, with public service media, if they don't very carefully inspect their intentions and their integrity, they are losing. The other observation you could make is that there will always be somebody that they always have an audience. So
2% is still 2%.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
So you can and maybe you think that's a little conspiracy thought that sometimes it should not be too popular.
Well, what's the average age of the BBC One viewer? Do you
65.
know? 65
Oh.
and getting older.
Is it 65?
But I mean,
It's 60 and it's older for some other
Yeah,
channels,
yeah.
but
That's
it's
the same in
60
Sweden.
and getting older.
Yes,
So
about.
actually, maybe this is a point. We are talking about a medium, technologically speaking, that has a popularity with a certain age group. Let's take a look at the much younger audience. What the mistake of the European guys is that they are trying to find solutions with the actual technology, to find solutions to actual problems with the actual technology. The cycle of adopting any kind of decision is probably 4 years. Technology in 4 years is we don't know where. We are having a media literacy project. We work with high school students. I personally talked to over 1,000 high school students. If you ask them, are you watching TV? You can barely count 3 or 4 hands in a group of 30. So television as a set, as a program, as an online, meaning a streaming product is not for them.
No,
So
but they are still. Because I think we've been discussing this for so many years now. You know, where are the young ones? How are we going to, get a hold of the young audience? But they are still watching, Game of Thrones, content.
on their
And
platforms.
so what? No, but isn't that's not maybe television, but it's still,
So it's on their platforms,
Yes.
and if we want to reach them, it's better probably, in my humble opinion, to go where they are. Just sitting in front of our TVs or
exactly.
behind our
No.
cameras and waiting for
Yeah,
them to
is
come.
this the way to go?
But young people consume a lot of news media. Because look, you can say, oh, young people, they're all watching Game of Thrones.
No, that
Well,
wasn't. I didn't mean that. I did just say they see that, they see news,
Yeah.
they see documentaries.
And they are some of the most intelligent consumers of news products, of all the demographics. So if you look at, there was some studies done on who was taken in by fake news, and it was pretty much baby boomers and above. So that generation of people who told you that media studies was worthless, turns out they really needed media studies. But when it came to Generation Z, when it came to millennials, very, very intelligent news consumers. So again, the framing of this question betrays some of our own biases in terms of who the intelligent viewer is and, what the workable model is. Perhaps we need to rethink that.
Yeah.
I think the problem for the public service broadcasters is that they can only spend the money once. So, for instance, the Danish Broadcasting Corporation, they fired 100 people in order to finance the cost of buying the rights for the music on YouTube. And also, I know a big German public service broadcasters. They have a cost about 10 million euro per year in order to keep their streaming up and running. So it's a very expensive. So that's the decision. Public service media, they have to say, okay, now we'll switch off the analog the signal from the antenna. We are only available online. That's the decision.
I think maybe we should let the maybe you want.
No, I didn't have anything to add.
No, I just think before I think we're going to let you. I'm sure you have questions you want to ask. Yes or no? Yes. But I think maybe first, Andjeas, is there something you want to say? Because we're going to let the word get out here and ask some questions. But is there anything you want to say before the screening of the film that you want, the audience to... What should they have in mind when they go in at 7 o'clock and sit down?
No, I think you should just clear your minds. And also watch the film until the screen turns black, right? Yeah.
Is this very important?
Yeah.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Yes, on the outside. Yeah, and we
the subliminal message comes last, right?
So we have microphone. We only have we have this one. Yeah, you can have. And then you can have mine here. No, you can have. Yeah, well. So, who is the first one? Yes.
I just was a bit curious. It's a very simple question because we talked about trust towards public service, and we mentioned all the other sort of countries represented here. I was curious to know if you have any idea how it is in Sweden.
Yes. Well, in Sweden we have. Still, right now we have a discussion. We've, as you said, this discussion has been for over 30, 50 years. But I think we have the discussion that public service is left-wing from the right-wingers. And then we have the left-wingers saying public service is right-wing. And so that's when you work in public service, usually you think, well, that's a good thing then. If everyone thinks we're doing, some people think we're doing a good job and the other side thinks, the opposite. But still, when you have researchers, then you can see that the trust is still very big for, Sveriges Television and Sveriges Radio. So,
if you allow me to just put this trust issue into perspective, BBC is worshipped in Romania. Everything we want is to have our BBC. And I keep telling people, because I met a lot of British people telling me the same thing, that BBC is boring, it's politicized. I keep them that, you should look through the eyes of the British people, but no.
No. BBC. But there's the same discussion in Sweden. BBC is the big, the BBC, they do this. And
this speaks a little bit about the without frontiers issue.
Yes.
Frontiers are there just to change the lens of our views.
And here's the thing is, I love the BBC and I want it to last for, forever, generation to generation, and that's why I want it to change. You know, none of this is coming from someone who says, "Oh, get rid of the," because all of us in Britain, if you have a TV, you have to pay a license fee, and that's what pays for the BBC.
But I have to ask you, the BBC, in what way do they work? Because I know that the Swedish public service companies, they work with, you know, who we have to find the new people coming into the company to work with.
Very, very slow. And you can see that in particular with its flagship political programming. So you have people who consider themselves objective. Studies show that they are not in their handling of particular issues. And what's more, I'm thinking of a particular few presenters here, is that if you are well regarded enough internally and you are, you know, a bit of a big dog, you can get away with having some outrageous conflicts of interest, financial conflicts of interest, political conflicts of interest. And this is the problem, is that the BBC's image of itself is that same, you know what, the right wing hate us, the left wing hate us, it must mean we're doing something right. And that's the line they come out with when they're doing something wrong.
Okay, maybe that's the opinion about SVT as well here. Do we have more questions from the audience? Not at the moment. So, Yannick, you wanted to...
No.
Oh, that was one.
Yes, thank you very much for a nice discussion. I'm very curious about this with cultural influence, so to say. I mean, in Sweden, we are basically consuming almost entirely all American programs. Also, we have some good Swedish as well, but I mean, American programs are very, very popular. Sometimes on SVT they show these kind of Middle East movies and so on, and they are great, but we don't hear about them, so to say, from other sources than SVT. Then. So what is your view on that?
See, the title of your TV show, that's also the title of a EU directive that actually prioritizes European productions and put a limit on how much American can be shown.
Yeah,
How do you mean? Where in the European? Yeah. That was back in the 80s. It was said that in order to operate as a broadcaster in Europe, you have to show at least this percentage of European productions in the airtime. So that put a limit on how much American Hollywood producer could show.
And then percentage can go up to 40%, so half of the programming. Almost.
Oh.
I mean, I think part of the way to sell a project like Eurikon was very, very much addressing this issue and articulating it as a way of making European TV and film production compatible on a sort of global market. So the US TV and film market was definitely sort of the counterpoint of European broadcast-oriented politicians.
Oh. Yeah.
I wonder if European politicians again could agree on something common.
How do you mean?
I mean, Eurikon, that was from that time because you felt American was a threat. Could they unite again and say, okay, now we'll do something again?
Yeah, do you think that would be a possibility?
Well, now that Britain's leaving and we can be the annoying one. Sorry.
Yeah, the Brexit. Oh, that's.
We went so long without mentioning it.
Yes, I know, but now we have it all over the news every day. So.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry.
Yes, it's not your fault.
I mean, we still have the Eurovision. So
hold on to Eurovision.
Well, I've had the mic now for some time. Yes. Just is it okay if I do definitely. My question? Okay, but my question was not about Brexit, but it was really about what you're talking about now. So I don't want to take anything before I've seen the film, but I want the answer to why don't we have more European media? It doesn't have to be only television. We can, why aren't there more European media? I think that's a very interesting question.
We have Eurosport and we have
Euronews.
Yeah, Euronews.
And I think that when I was developing this project, I got in contact with with a man. His name is Klaas-Jan Hendricks, and he was one of the initiators of this Eurikon project, and he's a Dutch broadcaster. He's been working as a correspondent in Washington and all that, and I think the thing is, he's very, very sad about this project. I mean, he's because he started this TV channel after the Eurikon, which is called Europa Television, and it was running for 18 months, and then it went bankrupt. And I think like his main answer to why it didn't work out is because of political interest. So the national broadcasters, they didn't want to share their space. They didn't want to share their sort of their what they owned in terms of viewers and content and so on. So yeah, I think the answer is
it's all about the money, who's going to pay and who's going to do what and how to organize it. But you said something about there are some topics now that could be really useful.
Yeah, I mean, we hear constantly, and they say the election at the European Parliament, that would be on climate. And that's one. I mean, the thing nobody really wants to talk about any longer is refugee. But that is like really the big elephant in the room. So if there should be two topics for European media, that could be the one. I wonder if
climate change and migration.
But I wonder if the language is the problem, or it's that we are voting national politicians that we don't really care about the EU, or we are just selfish. I don't know.
What do you think, Ash and Joanna?
I would add to all of this the cultural layer, which is also very important. We are still nations. Over the last 100 years, we have been brought up and educated in our national environment. This is why our public television is also called the national television, has the duty, the obligation to promote the national values. So we are still national audiences. People gather around points of interest. Eurosports is good not because it's Euro, but because it's sports. Euronews is good because not because it's Euro, but because it's news. If we manage to find a common point of interest for, let's say, a significant part of the audience in Europe, we will have a Europe media on that. But starting from top down, I don't think is going to work.
No.
I completely agree with you there, because it seems to me that we're putting the form ahead of the content, and I think that that's how you end up with spectacular, like no one wants to watch it. I can think of a few pieces of television and some films in particular which have been joint productions, which have been bi or even trilingual. And the reason why they've worked isn't because of the organizations behind it, but because of the strength of the idea and the story that was being told. Perhaps, and the things that I'm thinking of are fictional. Although they sort of tread that line of it's fiction through which you learn more about the world than any history book. The things I'm thinking of in particular are my favorite film of all time, which is a French film by an Italian director shot entirely in Algeria, so Battle of Algiers, which most perfect film ever made. And if anyone differs, I will fight you. And the Netflix series Narcos, which has sort of really pioneered that kind of bilingual storytelling, sort of American production team, Latin American writers cast from all over the place. And the reason why it worked is because people were viewing those things with a sense of going, I understand the world better for having watched it. So I think you have to think of what is the precise collaboration going to look like, rather than what's the organization that can generate it.
Because you have today also that, like the investigating journalists who have, we have seen it in Sweden, the Panama Papers, the disclosure of Panama Papers, which was not only European but international cooperation. So there are means of working together already, And Yannick, you wanted to say some last words?
I just thought of a third topic that would be uniting us. That is like, you say that Europe the 18th century, 19th century was belonging to Europe. The 20th century was belonging to the US. The 21st is belonging to China. So what are we going to do in Europe where we are like slightly getting more and more poor and more old?
You think, make television out of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely.
Just remember maybe why you asked me if I wanted to say something about the film, and that's because of the aeronauts, right? Yes.
Good.
Yes, because there are three guests who are introduced in the first episode, and if you don't know French, it might be a bit unclear why they're there, but they're visiting the studio because they're the first aeronauts in history, the first to travel the air. So that was just what I wanted to add.
With a hot air balloon.
Yes.
Like the one outside. The turtle on air. Yes. One last question then.
Right. I was thinking about people growing up today are called internet natives. And natives to what? What is the nation of YouTube and Facebook? Because they're clearly policed and got the rules and algorithms. But what natives could they be? Are they their own natives, like internet natives or countries?
I have a nice, from my background as a media history, there is a term about nations called they are imagined communities, and they are imagined because you never know all the participants in that. Today we have other imagined communities on YouTube.
Yeah, there is a serious corpus of academic studies on the changes of the digital has on human activities. Consider that in this room probably you have part of the last generation that knew the world without digital, that knew the world who was just analogic. So
the dinosaurs.
The digital revolution has already passed. So this is why the literature, it's a catchy phrase, this digital natives, it sounds very nice, but it has a meaning. And if you take a look at how the younger people react, you will see differences. I can make the difference between how the kids in the 11th grade react compared to the kids in the 5th grade. For them, internet is like this. The ones in the 11th grade still have dilemmas about it, but the youngest, no, they are there. There is a philosopher, he's called Luciano Floridi, and he suggested that the difference between online and offline is already obsolete because our life is so permeated with digital, and he suggested the term on life. So consider yourself living your own life and
on life online in a strong community.
And this is what, so they are natives of the on life medium.
I mean, this might be a boring way to answer your question, but to sort of address this question of nationhood, identity, politics, and the internet. I know that I come from a really annoying attention-seeking country at the moment, which is now has to be part of the European elections. I can't apologize enough, by the way. Like, I'm aware that we suck. So, one of the interesting things about these European elections are who is standing, because we have a few new parties which have just been invented to contest the European elections. And what's interesting about these parties is that lots of the candidates are internet personalities. So the way in which political conflicts have played out online, the sort of key figures, poles of attractions, are now standing for political office. Now, they might not win, but the interesting thing is how those imagined communities, those online communities, particularly for the far right, and then also the sort of super I want to remain in the EU by any means necessary group, how they translate that into grassroots organizing and on the ground capacity. I think that what we saw with the election of Donald Trump is that the alt-right were 5 steps ahead, because all the Democrat Party knew was very old school mobilization through real life institutions. What the alt-right were very able to do is use the power of memes, the power of virality, and combine that with a really strong on the ground political operation to revive white nationalism in the US. And isn't that the irony of the internet? It is the first truly borderless form of communication, global form of communication, and the most effective political community which has emerged from it is racist and nationalist.
Not only though, because that sounded like that's a sad last word though, because
not only, but what I'm saying is that the alt-right are 5 steps ahead. They're trying to do the same in the UK, right? That you've got these mad alt-right figures standing for the EU elections, hoping to be as annoying in Brussels as they are, in England. And what the left is going to have to work out is how we take our, the left is dominant in terms of values, right? Everyone's kind of, progressive, you can't call
Depends
people...
on what kind of glasses you have on.
Oh, yeah,
actually.
right.
Yeah.
Not the economic left, no. Right? But, sort of the idea that you can't use the N-word anymore, right? That's the sort of dominant idea. We haven't acted on that dominance. We haven't embedded that dominance, and that's why we're so vulnerable. So we need to find a way to reassert our sense of cultural momentum through the internet and combine it with on-the-ground organizing. And the role of these digital natives, young, politically aware, culturally astute people, is going to be critical in doing that.
That was, she's been on air a lot because she had the last word there. And is there anyone who wants to say anything to just wrap it up?
I just want to contest the imaginary communities. They are communities.
Yes.
They are not just material, but they are communities. And when we learn this and accept this, we will have that without frontier, whatever.
I think we will actually, after all these algorithms, we will get back to some kind of materiality.
Yeah. Okay, so nothing more from the audience? And I think then we have a stretch a leg and something to drink, and then we get back here 5 to 7. Thank you.